Hey everyone! Tonight's episode is based on real stories whispered through Hong Kong's darkest corners. We're heading to Tai Po, a quiet riverside district where locals still burn hell money to keep restless spirits away. But some nights, under the bridges, they say the paper keeps burning on its own, no fire in sight. From Tai Po's ghost bridge to Solopun's haunted village to the cursed school at Pingshan, these are places where night never ends, and memory refuses to fade. Stick with me. By the end, you'll know why even the bravest won't walk there after dark. And hey, if you love true horror from real places, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next story. Story 1, Tai Po Bridge. Mr. Chan had been driving the late-night minibus route for nearly 15 years. It was not a glamorous job, but it was steady, and it paid the bills. Every evening, he put on the same faded polo shirt with the company logo on the chest, packed his thermos of tea, and drove the green and white minibus out of the depot, heading for the far edge of the new territories. He wasn't a man who looked for excitement. After his wife passed away a few years earlier, the nights felt too quiet at home. Driving gave him purpose. Driving kept his hands busy and his mind from sinking too deep into loneliness. He liked knowing he had a job to do, a schedule to follow, and passengers to get home safe. Tonight felt like any other night when he climbed into the driver's seat. The minibus smelled faintly of diesel and dust. He checked the mirrors, tapped the dashboard, muttered a small prayer out of habit, and pulled out onto the road. It had rained earlier, and the streets were damp, reflecting the amber streetlights like smeared paint. A thin mist had started creeping down from the hills, softening the edges of the world until everything beyond the windshield looked dreamlike. Mr. Chan didn't mind fog. In fact, he found it calming. It muted the world, made the city sound far away. The passengers were quiet too, only 2 of them tonight. A young man with headphones nodding to music in the back, and an elderly woman clutching a bag of vegetables like she had just come from the market. They were both regulars. He gave them a polite nod in the rearview mirror but said nothing. After so many years, he knew most of his riders preferred silence. The engine hummed as the minibus climbed the narrow roads, winding past temples, half-shuttered eateries, and bus stops that looked deserted under the dim glow of their lamps. This was the part of the route Mr. Chan secretly loved. No traffic, no horns, just the sound of tires rolling over wet asphalt, and the chorus of frogs in the ditches after rain. He let himself relax, shoulders sinking as he took one hand off the wheel for a moment to sip from his thermos. Still, there was something about the fog tonight that was heavier than usual. It seemed to cling to the windows, thick enough that the wipers struggled to keep the glass clear. The headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the mist, leaving everything beyond a mystery. He turned the radio on low, letting a late-night talk host's voice fill the cabin. But even that sounded distant, as though it came from another world. He thought about the end of his shift, the hot soy milk he would buy from the Dai Pei Dong near the depot, and the small balcony of his apartment where he liked to sit and watch the last trains roll past. That was the rhythm of his life. Drive, finish, go home, sleep. Predictable. Safe. Then, just as the bus rounded a bend, the bridge came into view. Earlier than he expected. His brows furrowed. He knew this road like the lines of his own palm, knew exactly where the bridge should be, but the fog played tricks on the distance, made it loom suddenly, like it had been waiting just ahead. The ghost bridge. That was what the other drivers called it. A moss-covered stone span left over from the 1950s, narrow enough that 2 vehicles had to slow and take turns crossing. By day it looked harmless. By night it seemed to hold its breath. There were stories. There were always stories. About the flood in 1955 that swept a school bus into the river. About the teacher who jumped back in to try to save the children. About the crying some drivers swore they had heard after midnight when crossing alone. Mr. Chan had never paid attention to ghost stories. He was a practical man. But as the bus rolled onto the bridge, the fog grew so thick it felt like driving through smoke. The engine seemed louder here, echoing off the water below. And then he saw her, a figure standing dead still near the center of the bridge. She appeared suddenly, framed by the twin beams of his headlights. A woman, dressed in pale clothing that clung as though soaked through, her hair long and dark, hanging forward. She didn't wave. She didn't move aside. She just stood there, waiting. His foot tapped the brake instinctively, slowing the bus. His first thought was that she was stranded, maybe drunk, maybe in trouble. People sometimes waved down night buses when they missed the last train. The hiss of the brakes sounded loud in the fog, and when the minibus came to a stop, he reached for the switch that opened the sliding door. The door slid open with its usual soft sigh. She stepped up without a word, her head slightly bowed. No octopus card beep, no clink of coins in the fare box. She walked past him, silent, dripping, or was that just the sound of rain from outside, and sat down in the first row, directly behind the driver's seat. He caught a faint smell of river water, earthy and cold, before she went still. The door closed again, automatically. The bus was quiet now. Too quiet. Mr. Chan kept his eyes on the road. His hands had tightened on the steering wheel without him noticing. He told himself not to worry about the fare. He would collect it later. That was what the company rules said. Don't argue with passengers while driving. But something in his chest felt tight. He glanced at the mirror. The back rows were empty. The elderly woman must have gotten off at the last stop. He couldn't remember hearing the door open, but perhaps he had been distracted. The young man with headphones was gone too. Strange. He was sure they had still been on board a few minutes ago. His eyes flicked back to the road. The fog had thickened again, the bridge stretching longer than he remembered. For a moment, he had the unnerving sense that he was driving nowhere at all, just floating through a white void with only the yellow glow of his dashboard to remind him he was still awake. Behind him, the woman made no sound. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not even a breath he could hear. He wanted to turn around to glance over his shoulder and make sure she was real, but he didn't. Something deep inside, some instinct he couldn't name, told him to keep looking forward. The tires thumped softly as they reached the other side of the bridge. The road curved back toward the village lights, faint and distant through the fog. His heart slowed a little. Just finish the route, he told himself. Just drop off whoever's left. Then he could count the fares, close the ledger, get that hot soy milk, sit on his balcony and tell himself this was nothing. But the smell of river water still clung to the cabin, and the fare box sat silent. He kept driving, trying to convince himself that when he reached the next stop she would step off and the bus would be empty again. Anyone could be in his place, he thought suddenly. Anyone could be driving this road, late at night, exhausted, just trying to finish the shift, and look up to see a lone figure waiting in the fog. He gripped the wheel tighter, refusing to check the mirror again. The night had settled into that soft, humming quiet unique to the rural outskirts of Tai Po. The road was little more than a ribbon of damp concrete cutting through mist and shadow. Inside the minibus, Mr. Chan kept one hand on the wheel, the other lazily tapping the dashboard to keep himself awake. He had driven this route for 20 years. Nothing on this bridge had ever surprised him, at least not until tonight. At first, it was just the sound. The low, steady rumble of the engine seemed to dip into silence for half a second, as though someone had turned the key off and on again. The lights flickered. He frowned, glancing at the gauges, then shook his head. "Old bus," he muttered, as if saying it out loud could explain away the sudden hush. But when he glanced in the rearview mirror, he froze. The back seat wasn't empty anymore. There was a figure, a woman, hair long and dark, dripping wet as if she'd just climbed out of a river. She sat perfectly still, hands folded on her lap, her face hidden behind the curtain of wet hair. Chan blinked hard, rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, the seat was empty. He let out a breath, shaking his head with a soft laugh that didn't sound convincing even to himself. "You're tired, that's all," he said. It was nearly midnight. The fog, the humidity, the long shift. It was a recipe for tricks of the mind. But then he heard it. Drip, drip. The sound was soft but too rhythmic to ignore. It wasn't raining. He turned his head slightly, listening. The sound was coming from behind him. When he stopped at the next empty roadside corner, he reached back to grab the fare box, just to steady himself, and his blood ran cold. Inside were bills, but not Hong Kong dollars. They were hell money, the thin, ceremonial joss paper burned as offerings for the dead. His throat went dry. Someone must have left them there earlier, he reasoned. People were superstitious. Maybe some passenger thought it would bring good fortune. It wasn't that strange, right? He drove on, forcing himself to focus on the yellow halo of headlights cutting through the fog. Then came the smell, faint at first, muddy, damp, river-like. The kind of smell you notice when you pass a place where floodwater has receded and left everything half rotten. He rolled the window down a little, thinking maybe it was just the air outside, but the smell grew stronger inside the minibus, as though it was coming from the very seat behind him. And then he saw it. A bundle. It appeared so quietly he almost thought it had been there all along. A small wet parcel wrapped in cloth, sitting in the middle of the bench seat. He slammed the brakes, heart hammering. For a moment, everything was silent except for his own breathing. The fog outside seemed to press closer against the windows, as if the world itself was waiting to see what he would do. Chan slowly reached back, hand trembling, and touched the cloth. It was wet, icy wet, and as he brushed it, the fabric slipped open just enough to reveal what was inside. A tiny shoe, a child's shoe, soaked through, caked with mud that looked older than the road itself. He yanked his hand back as though burned. And then came the voice. A whisper, almost gentle, but close, too close, right behind his ear. "Bring them back!" Chan whipped around so fast his neck popped. There she was again. The woman stood in the aisle now, hair still dripping, face still hidden. Water pooled at her feet, running down into the grooves of the floor. Her chest barely rose as she breathed, if she breathed at all. And behind her, the rest of the seats were no longer empty. Dozens of faces stared at him. Men, women, children, pale, expressionless, each of them soaked as though they'd been dredged up from the river. No one spoke. No one blinked. Chan's hands tightened on the wheel, sweat breaking out on his forehead. For a long, impossible moment, he was paralyzed. And then the bus started moving. He hadn't touched the gas. The gear was still in neutral, but the vehicle rolled forward, crossing the bridge on its own, engine humming as though guided by some unseen hand. When the far end of the bridge came into view, he dared to look down again at the fare box. The hell money was gone. In its place were shoes, little shoes, big shoes, worn, muddy, some missing laces, some cracked with age, a line of them, filling the box neatly, as though placed there one by careful hands. When the bus reached the other side of the bridge, the engine cut. The lights flickered one last time, then steadied, and the seats were empty. Chan sat there, gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The night was still. He didn't report it, didn't tell a soul. Just finished the route, returned the bus, and walked home with the kind of deliberate calm of a man who refuses to believe what he has seen. But in Tai Po, stories travel faster than engines, and the next day, Someone asked him why his fare box was full of mud. The locals say what he saw wasn't just a ghost story. It was a memory, a demand. The flood of 1955 is still spoken of in hushed tones here. They say not all the bodies were ever found. Some parents were buried without their children. Some children were buried without their parents, and some were never buried at all. Every driver on that route knows, if you see the wet passenger at the end of the bridge, you do not refuse her ride. You do not speak. You just keep driving until you feel the weight of the bus lighten again. And if you ever find a child's shoe in your fare box, you pray it's the last one, because they say the bridge remembers, and it is still counting. Story 2. Solopun. The first odd thing is harmless. The pink survey ribbon Lily tied at the fork now flutters on another twig, not neatly remade. She reties it, chalks it up to wind. The trail is a seam through green cloth, stitched by roots, swallowed by vines. Burned talismans hang from door frames. Yellow paper, edges crisped, characters bitten away by fire. Her compass goes next. In the bus it behaved. Under the canopy it falls asleep. The needle droops and refuses to wake even when she taps the face. She opens her phone and drops a waypoint. The blue dot shivers, drifts sideways, then scribbles a tight spiral. Okay, she says, ironic and bright. Legend 1, Lily 0. Then comes the knocking. Wood on wood, stick on hollow trunk, an old hiker's rhythm to warn snakes. Knock, knock, knock. She calls, hello. The sound pauses, resumes to her right. She pushes through ferns to a doorway with no house and a beam that holds a palm-sized moth. Knock, knock, now to her left, unhurried. Strange becomes repeatable. At corners, blue strings appear on nails, each carrying a bone-white button. She didn't notice them before, but now there are 3, chiming porcelain ticks in the breeze. As the sun climbs, the grove quiets in layers. First cicadas, then sparrows, then even the thin whisper of water. The hush accumulates. She records a voice note. 10:42 a.m., ribbons shifting, burned talismans intact but feel like new ash. Compass failure confirmed. Possible iron deposits. Playback is clean, except for a faint rasp like breath pulled through paper. She pretends it's wind in the microphone. The vines hang still. Inside a roofless house, she finds a tiny altar in a corner. Lacquer peeled, bowls furred with dust. On the floor, compass parts, clear faces, bent needles, a brass pivot. Every needle points toward the altar's left leg. Lily touches the leg. The varnish there is bubbled like old skin. She steps back. Her laugh dies flat. By noon, a rhythm writes itself. Whenever she marks a turn, the ribbon migrates. Whenever she settles on a direction, weeds lean into a path that feels more correct. Whenever she follows that path, the knocking obliges and beats from that way, coaxing, pleased. Under everything is a sweetness, not rot and not incense, old smoke caught in wood. She messages her hiking group, photos plus a joke. So Lo Pun is rearranging my markers. Anyone else get that? Replies pop in. Alex. GPS is trash there, lol. Zoe. Iron messes needles. Nina. You just want a story. No one says leave. The unbelief is friendly and isolating at once. The knocking doesn't echo. In empty lanes it should bounce. Instead it arrives as if made inside her ribs. I hear you, she says. The rhythm pauses, resumes 2 beats faster. A vine slips across her ankle like a cat's tail. She kicks free and keeps walking, refusing to name the prickle at her scalp. In a square paved with broken tiles, a child's shoe prints step through grey dust, cross half the square, and stop mid-stride at a plank laid over a trench. On the plank, 3 coins form a triangle. Lily kneels, photographs, and, because curiosity always wins, nudges one coin a fingertip's width. The hush that follows is the kind a room holds when a name shouldn't be said. She slides the coin back. Leaves begin speaking with no wind to move them. Her water tastes metallic. The bottle mouth smells faintly of herbs. Purification tablets are fine. Goose flesh ripples her arms even in sun. She invents a rule. When the chill surges, count to 30 and move only after the count. Soon, she spends more time counting than walking, and the breadcrumb spiral on her map tightens like a snail's shell. At 1:15 p.m., a trail runner appears, sunburned, orange vest, earbuds. Relief breaks. She laughs and raises a hand. He slows. "You good?" She explains. Ribbons moving, compass asleep, the knocking. He shrugs. "Works for me." He taps his watch. The second hand ticks. "Want company back?" Pride answers. "I'm fine." He waves and vanishes up the slope. She takes the main track. Each fork looks freshly used, grass pressed, but by what feet she can't tell. The blue dot says she's walking straight and also that she hasn't moved in 10 minutes. Her shadow splits at her ankles as if each foot stands on a different beam of light. She tests with a stick. The stick throws one clean line. She decides not to discuss the shadow. Words can trap things. Photos help. She shoots doorframes swallowed by vines, the scar on the temple plaque, the altar leg, and scattered compass parts. Reviewing, she finds a thin grey band in 3 frames along the right edge, like a curtain barely pulled aside. In one, something like a fingertip protrudes into the light. Zooming until pixels break, she sees a tiny whirl where a fingerprint would be. Compression artifact, she tells herself. By 2, the village plays with geometry. Lily turns left and a lane dead ends at a wall that should be behind her. She turns and finds the wall in both places. The trick shifts with each attempt. Puzzles imply solutions, she reminds herself, and that reminder helps until it doesn't. She tells her recorder a story about a radio tower that scrambled compasses for hikers. Playback yields her voice, then a soft, patient tapping that wasn't there when she spoke. She tries a small ritual she learned at a shrine. 3 claps, a bow, a whispered apology for trespass. The knocking stops. "Thank you," she says. A dry leaf lifts and pivots in still air. Then gently, something answers by tapping from inside her throat. She bends, hands on knees, swallowing bile. She doesn't run. Running would concede that something could chase. No texts arrive. Reception has stopped pretending. Shadows stretch long and strange. She sits on a threshold and watches dust in a shaft of light. The motes briefly assemble the ghost of a character the burned talismans once held. She doesn't know the meaning. She doesn't take a photo. She decides to leave by a different line than she came. West to the sea, bus, city noise. She ties one more pink ribbon with an extra twist and speaks her name into the knot. 10 steps later, a ribbon flickers ahead, perfectly tied, perfectly twisted. It could be hers. It could be a courtesy from the village. She walks under it as if passing a gate. Every strange thing has repeated enough to feel procedural. Every ordinary thing has grown sharp. The smoke-sweet scent thickens until her eyes sting. She has what she came for. Notes, photos, a story's spine. Satisfaction should follow. Instead, she senses rehearsal, not climax. The pattern practicing scales before a performance. "Almost done," Lily says to herself and to anything listening. The trail looks trustworthy again. Dirt, roots, stones, the steady handwriting of the earth. She takes a step and the ground accepts her foot. She takes another and another. Behind her, the air draws itself shut like a curtain. The silence that follows isn't empty. It is attentive. Lily's breath fogged in the cold night air as she stood frozen at the edge of the forgotten village. The old man's words rang in her ears. This place doesn't let go. She had followed the faint knocking sound, believing it might guide her out, but instead it pulled her deeper and deeper, past walls of vine-choked houses, and skeletal trees, into a part of Solo Pun that felt untouched for decades. The mist swirled, denser with every step, until it clung to her skin like wet fabric. She looked down and realized her own footprints, which had been visible moments ago, simply stopped mid-step, as if someone had erased them behind her. Her heart kicked hard. Somewhere ahead, the sound came again. Tock, tock, tock. Measured, deliberate, too steady to be random. It was not the hollow sound of wood on wood. It was sharp, like a metronome counting down to something. She swept her flashlight along the path and caught a shadow just as it disappeared behind a doorway. Against all instinct, she stepped forward. Inside the abandoned house, the air was heavier, as though the place itself had lungs and was holding its breath. The beam of her light fell on the floor first, a scatter of broken compasses, their glass faces shattered but their needles twitching. All of them pointing toward the farthest, darkest corner of the room. Lily crouched, mesmerized, when the last compass stilled as if in unison, the needle locking into place like a judgment. She froze. Then came a sound like bare feet on wood. A child stepped out of the shadows, impossibly thin, its hair hanging wet and black across a grey face. One small hand clutched a splintered block of wood, the other held a compass whose needle spun wildly before stopping dead. The child did not breathe. Its lips parted once, but no sound came, and in that silence Lily's skin crawled. Then the house changed. With a blink, she was no longer standing in a ruin, but in a home still whole and living, the night of its death replaying around her. The beams above her caught fire. The smell hit first. Not dust, but smoke, burning hair, cooked rice turning to ash. Heat rolled off the walls in waves. The sliding paper doors glowed orange, hands slamming against them from the other side before vanishing as they burned away. She heard screams, high and frantic, children's feet pounding floors overhead, a man shouting orders, no one obeyed. The roof crackled and split with a deafening crack. Lily gasped and stumbled backward, clutching her light like a weapon. When she blinked again, the fire was gone. She was back in the ruin, but the corner of the room was still dark, impossibly dark, a hole in the world. Something stepped through it. They came one by one. A man with half a face, the other side blistered to exposed bone. A woman clutching a charred bundle that leaked soot as she moved. Children with cracked skin, holding blackened toys, staring with empty eyes. More came until the room was crowded, shoulder to shoulder, silent and watching. Lily backed away until her spine hit the doorframe, but there was nowhere else to go. Her flashlight flickered once, twice, then died, plunging her into the same darkness that had claimed them. The knocking began again, closer, right beside her ear this time. Then the child spoke. Its whisper was so soft, yet it felt like it was inside her skull. Still here. Lily tried to scream, but her voice failed her. Her throat locked, air rasping as if unseen fingers were closing around her windpipe. The compasses on the ground began to rattle, then shatter one by one, each shard glinting as it pointed at her. The figures moved closer, their motions jerky and unnatural, like marionettes pulled by invisible strings. She turned and bolted for the door, but when she stepped through, she was not outside. She was in another house, another ruin. She tried another doorway, then another, but each one only led her deeper into the village, like the place was folding around her, reshaping its paths to keep her inside. She fumbled for the trail tape she had tied earlier and followed it desperately, praying it would lead her back to the road. But when she looked up, the tape formed a loop, circling back to the very same house. The child was waiting in the doorway, its head tilted too far to the side, vertebrae popping in the silence. The compass needle in its hand swung toward Lily's chest and stayed there. The air turned icy, her breath billowing in thick clouds she could barely see through. Behind her, voices rose, a dozen whispers overlapping, repeating the same question. "Why are you still here?" The floor groaned, the boards warping as something moved underneath them. Lily stumbled and fell hard to her knees, pain shooting up her legs. From between the cracks, hands erupted, pale, blackened, skeletal, clutching her ankles. She felt the cold of them even through her boots, pulling her down as if to drag her through the floor and into whatever lay beneath. She kicked, twisted, fought, but the hands only multiplied, fingers climbing up her calves. Her light fell from her grasp and rolled, casting crazed shadows across the walls. Faces appearing inches from her own, mouths stretched wide, teeth gleaming, screaming without sound. She tore herself free and scrambled upright, slamming into the wall. The entire house shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling. The knocking became a drumbeat now, fast, furious, like a funeral procession gone mad. She lurched toward the door, not caring where it led, just needing to run. And then she saw it. The faint silver of her trail tape glinting in the dark like a lifeline. She ran, feet slipping in the mud, heart hammering so hard she could hear nothing else. She turned a corner and there, at last, she thought she saw the road. Relief flooded her. She sprinted for it. But when she burst through the last doorway, she was standing at the first house again. Her knees buckled. The child stood exactly where it had before, smiling faintly now, as if satisfied. The compass in its hand stopped moving, its needle forever fixed. Behind it, the figures filled the room once more, their heads tilting in unison. Lily realized, with a terror colder than the mist, that she had never escaped. The village had folded her inside itself. She was no longer lost in So Lo Pun. She was part of it. And So Lo Pun never lets go. Story 3. Tak Tak School, Bin Sun. Ethan didn't wait to see if the others were following. The instant the figure in red flickered on his phone screen, something primal took over. His body reacted faster than his mind could process. He spun and bolted, sneakers skidding on the dusty corridor floor. The abandoned school's air felt thicker, like running through water, every breath clawing at his throat. His phone light swung wildly, casting jittering shadows on peeling walls and smashed blackboards, each shape looking like something reaching for him. The gate. He just needed to get to the gate. Behind him, doors slammed one by one like invisible hands pushing him forward. A chalkboard somewhere screeched, as if scratched by unseen nails. His friends were shouting, but their voices were muffled, warped like they were underwater. The air smelled stronger now, that perfume, sickly sweet, as though someone had just walked past him even though he was alone. He didn't dare look back. His foot hit something soft. He nearly went down, catching himself on the wall. The phone camera tilted down for half a second. A child's shoe, the same one he saw at the bottom of the stairs. Now lying in the middle of the hall. Impossible. He hurtled over it, heart hammering so hard it hurt. The static on his phone screen grew thicker, turning red, crawling like veins. For an instant, in the middle of the distortion, he saw her, standing just 10 steps behind, hair hanging like wet ropes, dress blood red against the grey hallway. She wasn't moving, but somehow he knew she'd be closer the next time he dared to look. He burst through the main corridor into the entryway. The rusted gate was still ajar, but it felt heavier than before, as though someone was holding it shut. He threw his whole weight into it. It groaned, shrieked, and finally gave way, scraping his forearm hard enough to leave blood. He stumbled out into the night, the cool air hitting his sweat-soaked skin like ice. Outside, the silence was wrong. Too empty, like the crickets and frogs had stopped. He fell to his knees, gasping, chest on fire, vision pulsing at the edges. The phone slipped from his hand, but kept recording, lens pointed back toward the building. Through the screen, Ethan saw something he could not see with his naked eyes. The end of the hallway glowing faintly red, pulsing like a heartbeat. His own reflection in the phone's glass looked pale, his mouth open in a scream he didn't remember making. The others came running seconds later, laughing nervously, trying to turn the moment into a joke. But when they saw Ethan, their laughter died. His face was chalk white, streaked with grime and blood from the gate. His pupils were blown wide, like someone who'd seen a car accident. "Did you see her?" He choked. His voice cracked. "Tell me you saw her." They glanced back at the school. Nothing but darkness beyond the gate. No red glow, no sound. One of them said it must have been a reflection, a glitch in the camera. Another said Ethan was just trying to freak them out. But no one stayed to check. One by one they turned and left, and Ethan followed, though he kept glancing back over his shoulder. That night, he didn't sleep. He tried to shower the smell off him, that perfume smell, but it clung, seeping from his skin, from his hair, even from the clothes he had already thrown in the laundry basket. The video played back again and again on his phone by accident, or maybe not by accident. Each time, the figure in red was clearer, closer, almost facing the camera by the end. Once, late at night, when Ethan turned the volume all the way up, he swore he heard something under the static, a woman's laugh, soft and cruel. In the days that followed, Ethan changed. He used to be the loudest, the one who dared everyone else to do something stupid. Now he barely spoke. He jumped at sudden noises, avoided long hallways, and refused to wear red. Ever. The video never made it online except for a 10-second clip that cut out before the figure appeared. He couldn't bring himself to share the full recording. It felt wrong, like giving her permission to follow him beyond the walls of that school. Weeks passed, but the haunting didn't stop. Sometimes, walking home after dark, he caught a whiff of that same perfume on an empty street. Once, sitting in class, the overhead lights flickered, and he saw her reflection for a fraction of a second in the window next to his desk, standing behind him. He nearly screamed. The teacher thought he was having a panic attack and sent him to the nurse. The phone battery began draining faster than usual. It turned on by itself at night, screen glowing with that same faint red. When Ethan looked at his photo gallery, there were new images saved, blurred frames of the school hallway, empty except for a smear of crimson near the edge. He deleted them, but they always came back the next day, sharper than before. Months later, he tried to face it. He returned to Pingshan with his cousin in broad daylight, thinking maybe seeing the place in the sun would take the fear away. The gate was chained shut now, a no trespassing sign nailed across it. The air was hot, humid, yet he shivered. His cousin teased him for being quiet, but then a gust of wind blew across the courtyard, and with it came the smell, unmistakable, as strong as the night it happened. His cousin frowned. "Who's wearing perfume out here?" she asked, looking around the empty lot. Ethan didn't answer. He just turned and walked away quickly, phone held tight in his hand, making sure it was recording, as if proof would keep him safe. Even now, he can't escape her. Every ghost month, without fail, his phone buzzes with a new notification. New video saved. When he opens it, the screen is just static, but if he turns the volume high enough, he hears something. A single line, almost playful. "Come back." He always deletes it. It always returns. And Ethan has never gone near Tat School again. Ethan lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of his room, unable to shake the image from his mind. The bathroom door, the swinging bulb, the red skirt brushing the tiles, every detail replayed in his head, as if it was still happening in real time. Even when he scrubbed his hands with soap, he swore he could still feel the damp strand of red thread clinging to his skin. Sleep never came. By sunrise, with the birds just beginning to call, he had made up his mind. He had to know who she was, why she was still there, why she had looked at him like that. He went to Pingshan that morning, not to the ruin, but to the district library, a building as old as the village itself, with wooden shutters that creaked when the wind blew. The old reading room smelled faintly of paper and camphor. There was only one librarian on duty, a thin woman with silver hair pinned into a neat bun, her expression calm but sharp. When Ethan hesitated at the desk, she looked up and studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You went to Tat Tak last night, didn't you?" Her voice was soft, but there was no doubt in her tone. Ethan's breath caught. How did you know?" The librarian sighed as if she had heard the same question many times before. She stood slowly, crossed to a locked cabinet, and brought out a folder wrapped in twine. "People still go there. They always come back with the same look you have now. Sit." Ethan sat at one of the old wooden tables as she untied the twine and laid out the contents. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings, black and white photographs of school children lined up in assembly, a smiling teacher standing on the stairs. The librarian tapped one photo with a fingertip. Her name was Wong Siu Ling. She taught Cantonese and Mandarin here in the late 60s. She was a strict teacher but kind. People said she stayed late to grade papers and help the children who struggled. But those were troubled years. The city was changing, protests and political tensions growing. Some accused her of being disloyal for teaching in Mandarin. Others whispered that she had enemies who wanted her gone. Ethan's throat tightened as he listened. One evening she stayed behind alone, the librarian went on. The next morning the janitor found her hanging from the bathroom beam. The papers said suicide, but the villagers knew better. They said the knot was tied too high, the chair too far away for her to have kicked it. They buried her in a red dress, not because it was proper, but because her mother insisted. In Cantonese custom, red is not worn for burial unless you want the spirit to return. Her mother wanted her daughter to find justice, even if it meant she would never rest. Ethan felt the hair rise on his arms. Red, of course. The skirt under the door, the thread that had stuck to him, the flash of crimson he had seen in the mirror. "She never left," the librarian said quietly, gathering the papers back into the folder. Even after the school closed, villagers swore they heard the rope creak, smelled her perfume. They avoid the grounds now, but young people still go, as if daring her to appear. Some say she only shows herself to those who are alone, to frighten them, to warn them. Ethan thanked the librarian and left, but the weight of the story stayed with him all day. That evening, when the sky had turned the colour of old copper and the first bats were out, he went to find the village caretaker. He had seen the old man before, sweeping outside the ancestral hall, never speaking to anyone. This time, when Ethan approached, the man set his broom aside and regarded him in silence. "You saw her," the caretaker finally said, not a question. Ethan nodded. She was behind me, in the mirror." The caretaker's lined face tightened. "You should not have gone. But now that you have, you must finish what you started." He led Ethan behind the hall, where a small altar stood under a tin roof. Ash lay thick in the incense pot. The caretaker lit a stick, bowed 3 times, and began to speak. "We have tried to calm her spirit. Priests came, but every time they sealed the place, something happened. The seals fell, the mirrors cracked. One night, during a ritual, a red thread appeared around the monk's wrist and would not break until dawn." Ethan felt a shiver travel up his spine. The thread on his own hand, was it the same sign? "She shows herself because she wants to be remembered," the caretaker said. "The children never came back after that year. The school died with her. Those who see her carry a mark. If you do nothing, she will keep following until you bring the thread back to her." That night, Ethan returned to the school one last time. The air was heavy, windless, and yet the grass seemed to rustle as if warning him away. He stepped carefully into the courtyard, past the cracked basketball court and the fallen flagpole, until he stood in front of the bathroom door. The bulb inside swayed gently, though there was no wind. He knelt on the cracked tiles, placed the red thread he had kept all day onto the floor, and struck a match. The small paper charm the caretaker had given him flared up, filling the air with bitter smoke. "I know what happened to you," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm leaving this here. I'm giving it back. You can keep this place. I'm leaving." The smoke curled upward. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the bulb went still. The swaying stopped. The sweet, choking perfume faded into something softer, almost like fresh rain. Ethan's eyes flicked to the cracked mirror. For an instant, he saw her there. A tall woman in a red dress, hair hanging long and straight, eyes no longer furious, but calm. She inclined her head once, as if acknowledging him. Then the mirror clouded over, and she was gone. Ethan stood, heart pounding, and backed out of the bathroom. As he crossed the courtyard, the place seemed different. Not welcoming, but no longer hostile. The night sounds returned. Crickets, wind in the grass. By the time he reached the gate, the thread had turned to ash. He turned one last time. In the distance, the school stood like a shadow against the moonlight, and for the first time since he had entered this nightmare, Ethan felt something like peace. She was still there, but no longer chasing him. The lesson had been taught. What do you think? If you had to choose, would you dare to cross the haunted bridge at midnight, enter the village with frozen compasses, or enter the corridor of the red-robed ghost? Each place carries within it a silence, a memory that never fades. In many Chinese and Hong Kong traditions, the dead are not truly gone until their names are called, their souls guided back with offerings. Festivals like Ghost Festival and Qingming Festival exist so that the living can burn incense, paper money, and remember the dead. When names are forgotten, when stories are forgotten, it is said that the spirits wander, looking for someone who will see, listen, and call them home. These stories are not just about fear, they are about memory. Footprints on the bridge, stopped compass needles, the red thread on the floor. Each is a call to be recognized, a plea not to be erased. So, where would you never step foot in at night? Bridge, village, or school? Comment your answer below. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story will take us deeper into places where the past refuses to be buried.